Jews came to Iraq by force and left by force. Between the arrival and the departure, there were more than 2,500 years. But they loved the land and contributed to it through art and knowledge. Over the years, they enriched it with a diversity they brought and upheld. They became part of it in all its beauty and hardship. And their most important imprint is perhaps unknown to many. It is in music and song. At the beginning of the 20th century, Jews constituted nearly 2% of the entire population of Iraq. They lived mostly in cities, mainly concentrated in Baghdad. They represented nearly a quarter of its population at the time. They played an important role in the nation's economic and artistic life. Iraqi Jews were especially creative in the world of modern Iraqi music, making unprecedented contributions. They changed it from the traditional nature based on religious hymns and maqams into urban modern song. Maqams are conventional non-religious odes sung to the numbing single tempo of repetitive rhythmic music produced by Oriental instruments. The process of this change began in the early part of the 18th century, when the maqam was the dominant form of music, both for the elite and the common, who listened to it in public tea houses.
يلي طلعت زغلان قول ليش مرامك كل ما ردت ممنون يحكم غرامك كل ما ردت ممنون يحكم غرامك ونوحي نوحي روحي على العفوش يا روحي نوحي 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 روحي على العفوش يا روحي نوحي.
Iraqi Jews' unique contribution in this regard was made possible by their ability to play traditional Oriental as well as modern Western musical instruments. Jewish composers constituted all the members of the first modern orchestra in Iraq, founded in 1929 by the famous singer Muhammad el-Kabunchi. The vast majority of Iraqi composers in the nation were Jewish. Historians indicate that in the 1930s, of the 214 composers in Iraq, only 5 were non-Jewish.
Jews were no doubt the most famous among the players of maqam music. No two individuals disagree on this.
This music was passed from father to son, and you see whole families, like Bassoon family, who was known for the music. Before it, there was the Cohen family, whose members were musicians. They passed it down to their sons, and their sons to their sons, and so on. It remained in them. Music was a monopoly of the Jews until 1950.
The majority of the maqam singers, on the other hand, were Iraqi Muslims. Still, there were many maqam singers among Iraqi Jews. The most famous among them were Israel bin Sassoon, the teacher, Rahmin bin Naftar, and Haskell bin al-Yahun Shaheen.
The Jews loved the Iraqi maqam. Their love for it was without a limit. The first one to sing maqam was Salman Moshe, and he was an Iraqi Jew. Many singers learned from him. He influenced the famous maqam singer Rashid al-Kandarshi.
Sheikh Jalal al-Hanafi mentioned in his book that there were 188 maqam singers, and Kojaman mentions that 21 of them were Jewish.
There is a consensus among Iraqi music historians that Iraqi Jews played an instrumental role in the birth of the first modern Iraqi songs. These were simple songs in terms of musical composition. The first among these was You Who Climbed the Stairs in 1898, followed by My Darling in 1902. The most famous Iraqi Jewish song in this regard was Congratulating You in 1910. Later, Iraqi Jews led a unique renaissance in music and singing which Iraq witnessed following World War I. This renaissance came after the British ended the 4-century Ottoman rule over Iraq, themselves becoming the colonial power in 1917. The British allowed the opening of nightclubs that the religious Ottomans had banned. Throughout the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, these nightclubs gradually spread out. They functioned like present-day radio, TV stations, and production companies. In them, songs were composed and talent discovered. These clubs also brought in many female singers from other Arab countries, which kicked in heated competition among Iraqi and Arab singers. Jews owned many of these clubs.
These clubs were the base of Iraqi music. There were no radio at this time.
The nightclub was like a music library. For instance, a person enters the nightclub to learn the difference between the oud and the harp, and the difference between the violin and the flute. Also, he learns the different types of maqam, the different types of rhythms, and of melodies. Henceforth, the increase in the number of these nightclubs meant an increase in the knowledge about music.
These nightclubs used to be attended by high-level bureaucrats in the state, senior officers in the army, and the police, and the ministers, all come to listen to the new songs whose music was made by Saleh and Dawood al-Kuwaiti. The nightclub was a respectable place.
وداوود الكويتي وكان مكانا محترما.
But the most significant contribution was in the music composition itself. The two most important Iraqi composers of the period were the Kuwaiti brothers. Saleh al-Kuwaiti, who is widely considered as the father of the modern Iraq song, and Dawood al-Kuwaiti, who composed the music for many of the early songs. Both were Jewish.
The Iraqi song in the 1920s, 1930s, and 1940s was the exclusive domain of Iraqi Jews. This is a fact beyond dispute or doubt.
لا تقبل الشك ولا الجدال.
Then there were other less known Jewish composers such as Salim Zibli, Azuzi al-Alwad, and Dawood Akram. The Kuwaiti brothers were responsible for establishing the first music institute in Iraq in 1931. In it, they taught students how to play on two instruments, the oud and the violin. At the time, only few could play these two instruments, both of which became permanent features in the modern Iraqi song. When the Iraqi monarchy established the nation's first radio station in 1936, Iraqi Jews provided it with most of the songs and the music it broadcast. And when the radio's first musical group was formed, 4 out of 5 members were Jewish. Saleh El-Kuwaiti was asked by the government to form the group. Iraqi music researchers disagree on the reasons behind the Jewish interest in music. Some attribute it to the close relation between Judaism and music in general. Others believe that Islamic and social restrictions on music pushed away most Iraqi Muslims from this field, leaving it open for Iraqi Jews.
السبب الرئيسي هو أن
The main reason is that singing and music are inseparable parts of the rituals of Judaism. Since building the first temple, Jews used to sing and play music inside it. For instance, the Psalms and the Song of Songs, but in particular, the Psalms of King David.
Historically speaking, Jews are the first people in the world, or on earth, who invented music, because the first temple for worship was a Jewish temple, and from there, Psalms of David began.
Although the most significant Jewish contribution was in the area of music composition, there were still many male and female Jewish singers in Iraq. Some noted names were those of Sultana Yusuf, Salima Murad, Filfil Kurji, and others. Salima Murad was the most famous female singer in Iraq between the 1920s and 1950s.
She mastered the rules of singing in a way no other female singer could. This is one thing. The other thing is that she received support from Jewish musicians who composed the best music for her. This helped her to become the top Iraqi singer.
يا قلبي بهالفرح وملتقى أحبابنا غني عادت فرحتي يا هلا بأحبابنا غني يا قلب غني.
Salima was born in Baghdad in 1905 to an Iraqi Jewish family known for its love for the maqam and traditional music. In 1929, she asked Saleh El-Kuwaiti to compose the song for her. He composed Your Heart is Made of Stone. The song was met with much success, becoming an Iraqi classic. Generations of Iraqi singers sang it. Murad's fame and talent grew as she toured Arab and European countries.
Salima Murad was the first one to have a major contribution to the founding of Iraqi song.
In the 1930s, she surpassed the diva of all Arab singers, Egyptian songstress Kulthum. When Kulthum visited Iraq sometime in the 1930s and listened to the song, She asked Murad to teach her how to sing it so that she could perform it upon her return to Egypt. Experts believe that the voice of Salima Murad is the most recognizable voice in the history of Iraqi music. It manages to remain at the top of the chart throughout changing times and despite the advent of other competing female voices.
Salima's performance was very special, and her voice was deep and strong. She recorded a number of songs and they were famous. Her songs are still sung by other singers until the present day.
Because of the special quality of her voice, its beauty, its high-pitched nature, its melodic ability, she was able to become the unparalleled top singer of her generation of female singers. There was no other voice at the time that even tried to compete with her voice.
Murad also contributed to the rise of the most famous male singer in Iraq, Nazim al-Ghazali. Al-Ghazali, a Muslim of humble origins, was only at the beginning of his career. After meeting in 1952, the two fell in love and got married the following year. During the 10 years of this marriage, Murad helped al-Ghazali sharpen his singing skills, propelling him into stardom. But his career would be short-lived because of his untimely death in 1963.
She was the real guide to the greatest voice in the entire history of Iraqi singing. It is the voice of Nazim al-Ghazali.
وعيونه سود سود محبوبي غلو وبيجاني منين جدة.
Murad's contributions to Iraqi music were so significant that when Iraqi Jews were deported from Iraq in the 1950s, she was exempted from the deportation order by a special decree from the Prime Minister at the time.
بالحاجبة دعيالي بالحاجبة دعيالي بالربة شتم بالربة شتم بالوجنة أجنيلي بالوجنة أجنيلي بالعين أسلم بالعين أسلم حلو حلو وبوجنتك شامة عليك الليل ما نام تربيت الخلق عليك الليل ما نام.
The role played by the Kuwaiti brothers in developing Iraqi music was significant, to say the least. Salah was the more important of the two. Dawood's role was to complement that of his older brother. Saleh, the capable composer who laid the first building blocks of the modern Iraqi song, composed most of the music made by female singers throughout the 1920s, 30s, and 40s. In those decades, singing in the cities was exclusive to females. Male singers were hard to come by, except for maqam and country singers. Dawood, a skilled violinist, composed the music of a few songs, but his main focus was helping his more prolific and talented brother in his compositions.
صالح الكويتي هو أحد
Salah al-Kuwaiti is one of the real builders of the Iraqi song. Beginning in the 1920s until his departure from Iraq in 1953, together with his brother Dawood al-Kuwaiti. Both of them left us a timeless legacy of songs that are hard to repeat.
يصعب تكرارها.
Salih al-Kuwaiti is one of the pioneers who established singing in Iraq. Before him, there were no recordings for songs, and if they existed, they had no impact because they were very rare. But Salih and Dawood al-Kuwaiti and their generation, most of whom were Jews also, were in fact the ones who founded the Iraqi song.
The story of the two brothers began in Kuwait, where they acquired their last name. Saleh Israel Kub was born in that country in 1908. 2 years later, Dawood was born. Their family moved from Iraq to Kuwait at the turn of the century.
I am originally Iraqi because my father was born in Iraq. It was only I who was born in Kuwait, and I grew up there because my father worked in Kuwait.
As children, the two brothers loved music. That love started when a relative presented a gift of a violin to Saleh and an oud to Dawood. They learned how to play them on their own. The two brothers never parted with the two instruments, as they themselves never parted from each other. In 1927, the two brothers decided to move to Baghdad after a brief stay in Basra. Baghdad opened its doors to them. In the beginning, they worked as musicians at the El Farabi nightclub. In 1929, opportunity knocked at Saleh's door when the then-famous singer Salima Murad asked him to compose the music of a song for her.
I remember that late singer, Salima Murad, sent for me and she expressed the desire to work together. I agreed. We worked together briefly, then she asked me to compose music for some of her songs. Among the first ones I did were Your Heart is Made of Stone, He is the One Who Troubles Me, Slema, and approximately 6 or 7 songs. This is the first week I started to compose the music. These songs were received positively by the audience. People loved them a lot, and I felt encouraged when I saw people feeling these songs. Because of this, I began to love so much composing the music of the songs.
قلبك صخر جلمود محن عليا
وانت بطرب وبكيت ما تدري قولوا لا ما بيقولوا لا.
It was the hit song, Your Heart is Made of Stone. It showed Saleh's talent, and it was the first modern song complete with a musical introduction, refrain, and coda. The success encouraged Saleh to do other songs following the same pattern he had established in Your Heart is Made of Stone.
When he composed the first song to Salima, it called Galbak Sakhar Jalmud. So when she started to sing it, it was like something, a revolution. The people like it very much because it was composed from several types of maqams, and it was nice to the ear.
Saleh loved the maqam and mastered its rules. He used his maqam knowledge to develop the modern Iraqi song.
Because Saleh was so engrossed in the Iraqi maqam that he became a real authority in it, he used to play from different kinds of maqam. This was reflected in the diversity of music he brought to the Iraqi song. This is why his musical compositions gave the Iraqi song a graceful, attractive, diverse, and full of life spirit. This is also why many Iraqi and Arab singers wanted Saleh to compose the music for their songs.
Saleh al-Kuwaiti was also influenced by the more developed Egyptian music and singing, particularly the work of composer and singer Muhammad Abdul Wahab. He integrated into his work some Egyptian musical techniques to create lively, diverse, fairly complex songs, ones which were full of the urban Baghdad spirit.
For a month, I was with him every night, and when he was going to sing in a concert, he sent for me. He liked me, and I liked him.
Saleh composed the music of the songs for most of the female singers of the period, such as Salima Murad, Sakia George, Munira El Hawazwaz, and Sultana Yusuf. Dawood also composed the music of several songs for the Egyptian female singer Narjis Shawki. Saleh was the first to compose the music for the duet songs such as Bird, Where Are You Going, and You Hurt Me. He was also the first to compose the music for poems, unlike the lyrics that were written specifically to be sung. In order for these poems to be properly sung, much musical complexity was needed, and Saleh was up to the daunting task. What added to Saleh's distinctive mark was his careful choice of the lyrics of the songs, whose music he composed. He collaborated with the talented Baghdad lyricist Abdul Karim El-Elef, who wrote the lyrics for all Saleh's songs.
وغيري على الحاضر ينور الناس لو تسألني عنك شردجة شغور هذا مو
Finally, Saleh composed music for the songs in the first Iraqi musical film, Aliyah and Assam, in 1947, co-starred by Salima Murad and Sabia Abrahim. Together with his brother Dawood, Saleh opened a tea house in Baghdad, through which both came to discover a myriad of local talent. In the first half of the century, tea houses brought singers and musicians to perform before their customers. Because of his many achievements, Saleh al-Kuwaiti was widely respected by the elites and the common alike. Sometime in the late 1930s, King Ghazi gave him the gift of a golden clock with the monarch's seal on it. But the country the two brothers loved and gave so much to did not ultimately treat them in kind. As the Arab-Israeli conflict started to heat up, the Iraqi government, beginning in the late 1940s through the early 1950s, issued a series of laws curtailing the basic rights of Iraqi Jews and finally stripping them of their Iraqi citizenship. All through these difficult years, terror and looting campaigns were directed against Iraqi Jews to force them to flee the country. Still, the Iraqi government temporarily prevented some highly skilled Jews from leaving until they taught their non-Jewish Iraqi professional counterparts their skills. Saleh and Dawood were among those who were held. They were allowed to leave in 1953.
Prime Minister Nuri Said did not allow Jewish musicians to leave. He held them back until 1953, so that they could teach the new generation of Iraqi musicians all what they knew in singing and playing the instruments. These Jewish musicians should have left Iraq either in 1947 or 1948, but he kept them until 1953.
The departure of Jewish composers left a huge vacuum in the music scene in Iraq. This vacuum was gradually filled by the emergence of new, young composers throughout the 1950s. These composers were inspired by Saleh al-Kuwaiti's experience and learned much from it. The injustice that Iraq incurred on the Kuwaiti brothers continued even long after their departure. Their unique contributions were deliberately covered up by official decrees. They were not mentioned anywhere, neither in the media nor in the school books. The height of this systematic cover-up came in 1973, when a special committee was formed to make an inventory of Iraqi music and songs. The names of the Kuwaiti brothers and other Jewish singers and composers were removed from the final list the committee produced.
والدفتر
The Kuwaiti brothers suffered tremendously in Israel. For a period of time, Saleh ran a small housewares store. Ibrahim Abida, an Iraqi music historian, wrote about Saleh working in that store.
I approached him, feeling pained and frustrated at seeing this giant of Iraqi music hidden in a little store. If I wanted to buy everything in that store, it would not have cost me more than $100.
I think that after that they left Baghdad to Israel. The truth is that he didn't want to come. He knows that his audience are not here. So, but you know, for artists, the main thing that was important to an artist or a musician is audience. But you know, my mother and all the family and all of that, all the family left to Israel, and there was no any alternative just to leave. I can say that my father and his brother lived here 35 years, but they still, in his mind, in his heart, was living there.
Dawood died in 1976.
Dawood died from a heart attack. I think that one part of Salah died with him. Even he stayed alive 10 years after, but he dying slowly. And I will give you the picture. They start to go to the funeral, and the body of Dawood is in the car, and my father said that he cannot go to the graveyards. He cannot go there. So we asked the car to go to the house, and my father went down and say goodbye to his brother and pray. And then I was staying with him. I am his little child, the last one. So we go back in the house, and my father took the violin out, and he's starting to play for his brother. It was something that I cried, my father cried. It's like a requiem. In the violin, he said to his brother goodbye.
Salah died in 1986 in Israel, leaving behind a timeless musical legacy.
Music is something that will never die. And this was the only thing that my father left us as a family. He didn't left us money or anything like that, but he left us a music and a tradition. And we kept it. And we will keep it.
هاي الفرحة بفرحتين فرحة وقرة العين يا يهود بغداد الصابر يا يهود بغداد الصابر يهود العراق الصابر يحفظكم عذر السوفر حلو حلو السوفر حلو حلو السوفر وحلو حلو السوفر وحلو حلو يا يهود قلب فرحان يهود قلب فرحان كل سنة يجونا بتمام الهلو لميا نسوة الهلو لميا نسوة بعض معذرة سوفر حلو حلو السوفر وحلو حلو السوفر.
Jewish singers and composers gave Iraq so much. They gave it the beauty of song, and the delight of music. They were the pioneers in the paths of creativity in an Iraq that was finding its way toward the light of modernity. They helped find it. But this Iraq was ungrateful. It deprived them of the land they cherished and hid their imprint on it.